welcome. I wanted to show you this video from the Behavior Panel. They are one of my favorite YouTube channels, merely because of mostly because of the educational elements. They are a panel of 4 experts in their own right, coming from different backgrounds, different specialties, and when they get together to analyze videos, it can be informative, educational, and even enlightening at times. I have followed them for a while, and when they uploaded this video, I was like, oh yes, they're going to talk about Trooper Michael Proctor. But I wanted to show you this thumbnail because, in fact, they do not mention Trooper Michael Proctor at all in this video. This is the thumbnail for their video. And this video was uploaded 2 months ago. And 2 months ago was right around the time when Trooper Michael Proctor's text messages and correspondences were going viral. Everybody was talking about how disgusting Massachusetts State Trooper Michael Proctor is. And the behavioral panel got in on it. Only they uploaded this video with a thumbnail showing Trooper Michael Proctor during trial, and at no point during this entire video do they mention Trooper Michael Proctor. At no point during this entire video is anything mentioned about Trooper Michael Proctor in trial, like at all. But they deliberately used a photograph of Trooper Michael Proctor at trial. I'm sorry if I'm twisting the words around. Trooper Michael Proctor. Like, okay, I'm just saying there's a point here, and the point is that I was disappointed in them for using this clickbaity thumbnail for their YouTube video. Like during the time that everyone was talking about Michael Proctor, and I just feel like it's a bit, it's like it just gets under my skin when YouTube channels do this. You can come off as genuine and as authentic as you want to, which I thought the behavior panel were. They always talk about being genuine and doing the right thing, and you can spot a liar. And these are the things that deceitful people do. But isn't it deceitful? Isn't it deceitful and misleading for the behavior panel to use this thumbnail, to use an image of Trooper Michael Proctor when they don't even talk about Trooper Michael Proctor at all in this video? It just gets to me. Like, keep it real, people. You know, I get it. Everyone's on YouTube. People are trying to, it's a rat race on YouTube. People want those clicks, but don't do that to people. Don't do that to me. You know, when I make thumbnails, I make them pertain to the video. You know, I don't even use my face. Like, and I'm not trying to throw shade on anyone that uses their face on their thumbnail. I get that it helps the algorithm. I get it. And the same with social media. The more selfies you take on social media, the more that the algorithm picks up on and you get pushed through the algorithm. I get it. But keep it real, please. Come on, behavior panel. You guys are supposed to be like the source for knowing how to discern a lie from the truth. And this thumbnail is a lie. Just saying. Let's play the video.
Today we're going to talk about Karen Reed. Greg, tell us about the videos we're going to watch.
So this video interview, and it was a very short one, and we have very short clips, was from Nightline, ABC Nightline. We've also talked to the guys at Dateline. We're trying to get their video, and I don't know that we'll ever see it, but this is the only published interview with her to date. She's on trial for the murder, I think it's manslaughter, murder 2 that she's been charged with in Boston courts for the death of a Boston police officer. Really good, interesting one. Her boyfriend.
You're alleging that law enforcement officials in this state committed murder and that they're covering it up. Why would they want to be involved in this?
Because he's dead. I think things went too far. It was late. There was alcohol involved, but they're all family. And there's many of them involved.
After posting bail, Reed has spent much of the past 18 months in and out of court awaiting a trial date.
And me and my family and my attorneys and my team have marshaled every resource to get to the truth. It just feels like no one else wants it.
Prosecutors allege that Reed hit O'Keefe with her car after getting into an argument earlier in the day, leaving him to die in the middle of a snowstorm in January 2022. But Reed says she had no reason to harm her boyfriend.
I would call him the patron saint of Canton. He was just very selfless, frugal, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone that didn't care for John.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, okay, look, straight off with this one, let's just say it's super tight cuts here. It's choppy, it's all over the place, but it is what it is. I mean, it's the best we have at the moment, and so we've been holding off looking at it, but we'll look at it, but just it's choppy, so there's an issue there. You know about that.
He's referring to how the interview has been edited so much that it's just choppy. We don't know what Karen Reed is really saying from one scene to the next. We don't know what she was saying previous because it was cut off. The editing is so blatantly obvious.
What have we got? Well, really tight body language, not only in the whole of the body, but in the face as well, locked down, but it's choppy, so we don't know what's happening before and after. But so we're going to take that as a baseline. I don't know. I'm going to see what everybody else says about that, because it's a bit of a tricky one. Here's what I will say, though. There's a very different rhythm to the speech on, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who didn't care for John. So the rhythm for me changes on that sentence. And let's look at that sentence. It's all via the negative. It's all negative. You could say the same thing by saying, I and everyone cared for John. You could say it that way. The way she says it is, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who didn't care for John. So it's very negative, it's detached, and it's distanced. And that doesn't sound too good, I would say. Chase, what do you got on this one?
I think this dude, who's clearly from the UK, I think he needs to look at how people talk in Massachusetts. I can attest to it because, again, if you didn't know, I live in Massachusetts, and people around here talk about other people all the time. Gossiping is what people do in Massachusetts. It gets annoying, gets under my skin. I disassociate a lot because of it. People here are just far more judgmental than probably people in the West Coast, in the Midwest. People here are just, maybe it's the weather, I don't know, it makes people hard. Also New York, of course, people have known that about New York. New York is notorious for people being hard, too hard, and just mean. And people are similar in Massachusetts. So I'm saying the way in which Karen Reed worded it, it's like from a Massachusetts standard, it makes sense to me why she worded it like that. I don't see it as disassociative at all.
Very similar notes. But one of the things is she starts nodding before the question is over. We don't see this very often, hardly ever in guilty people. And she's nodding to the rhythm of her speech. And people being deceptive find this almost impossible. And still, she's not making a denial here. And the statements that I'm referring to were not openly remarking about anyone's guilt directly in words. So her statement about getting the truth out there is surprising if she's guilty. And what we see so often in guilty people is avoidance and redirection to their innocence and injecting more ambiguity into the narrative to just muddy the waters. The behavior I'm seeing in this clip at the end here is fluid, it's flowing, there's no loss of words, there's no loss of fluency like I just had there, and none of the other 55 hallmark behaviors that we tend to look for in people who committed a crime and are then lying about it on camera. Her head nodding, emphasis on emotional words and usage of his name, using his name, is all very congruent and what I would expect to see in a situation like this. One might say it's as it should be. And again, keep in mind, as we're going through these clips, I can't speak for everybody, but I will be using the 5 C's in a hierarchical order. I'm looking for changes to behavior, clusters, context, culture, and then the checklist, all the known deceptive behaviors, even though those don't exist. That'll be the last thing that I'm really looking for. So in each video we look at, I'm going to give you a tip to make sure you ask better questions in your life, or if you're a reporter talking to somebody who's a suspect of something. So the first one is develop a baseline. Ask a few basic questions at the beginning of the interview: where somebody went to college, what they do for a living, how they met their partner. So allow their natural behavior when they're telling the truth to be visible before you start digging. Scott, what do you got?
That was interesting to have two different body language experts, and they just write from the back, and they have completely different takes on what they just witnessed.
We got a couple things going against us. Number one, this video is so choppy, it's ridiculous. It's the most Botox we've ever seen on somebody on our show. I've never seen so much. I don't think in person in life, I don't think I've seen somebody with so much Botox as her in this one. So it's really hard to see any emotions. There are no micro expressions whatsoever in this anywhere. I agree with you, Chase. Those confirmation nods as she's talking, that makes total sense. When you look at those, quite often people think that means she's saying yes when she's supposed to be saying no, and that kind of thing. But it's just confirming what she's saying. Her voice tone and volume never change. It's really loud, and it's almost like she's locked on to one volume and one tone and just stays there the whole time. So that's kind of, I haven't seen that for a long time. I've seen it a few times, but this for me is odd. But I don't know if it's odd for her, because we have no idea what her baseline is. There's no chance for that, because these videos, like I was saying before, are so choppy. And which means we're going to have to focus a lot on what she says, as opposed to how she acts or reacts to things from a body language perspective. Greg, what do you got?
So let's talk a little bit about what happens when you're in front of a jury, because at the end of the day, that's what really matters here. It doesn't matter what we say in this thing. But what she's going to have to be careful of is she is not a warm person in this interview. I don't care who you are. She's intense. And intense is okay. Some people are intense, others aren't. But I see no grief, no sorrow, no sadness when she's talking about, because he's dead. The only thing I see is aggravation at why they're questioning her. And that is not a good look when you're sitting in front of a jury. Doesn't matter. And I said this when we were doing a news piece. Look, you need to humanize yourself. I don't care if that's who you are. You need to humanize yourself. So when I don't see that, I then want to start looking for other places she may start to leak a little information and that kind of thing. I also think, Mark, I'm just going to hit two things, because I can't say enough how choppy this one was.
I understand where he's coming from as a body language expert, but again, I think still you have to know the personality here a bit more. And she's talking loud, and she does have a disability. I mean, some would say it's a medical condition, but it can also be viewed as a disability. And I'm saying, like, I'm picking up what she's putting down. I'm reading her, and I'm not seeing someone who is cold or apathetic, or I'm seeing someone who has a sense of urgency. And and if you recall my rantings about Massachusetts, people around here are constantly hustling. The rat race here it's so intense. It can drive you mad, and it can get very toxic. And I'm just saying that people around here tend to have a sense of urgency. And when your life is being threatened, your freedom is being threatened, and you have spent the last couple years being accused of killing someone, and you know you didn't do it. You know it wasn't you, especially because you are aware of the experts who were hired by the government to prove what happened to your boyfriend. And so you feel even more like the truth needs to get out. I have a sense of urgency. He's dead. But listen, this is what actually happened, and they're all framing me, and they've all ganged up on me. I am outnumbered. Like, that's how I'm perceiving Karen Reed. I mean, again, I love the behavior panel, but I think they are incorrect more than they probably realize. And just in a general sense, you just, yes, some things are glaringly true, and maybe a lot of us can agree when it comes to body language. Some things you can just tell someone's lying, but when you blanket those techniques on everyone, you you may not you may override someone's personality. Like you might your protocol, your techniques might blanket someone's personality, and you might be incorrect is what I'm saying. Like you can apply those techniques to maybe most people, but to me it's not going to be foolproof. The body language is not foolproof. It's not exact science. I only stand behind exact science. Theoretical science can like you can always factor in the variables. And so I'm just saying no one should really stand behind body language science because it's not an exact science. But it can still be informative. It can still be enlightening. And some of the tactics, some of the skills in reading body language can be effective. I'm not, what's the term? I'm not denouncing it at all. I am just saying from a realistic perspective, from an exact science perspective, it is not exact science. And we should all keep that in mind. And again, when dealing with an innocent person here, I think it's especially important to be careful what you're saying, because what you're saying could influence people to think that someone's guilty when they are not guilty. And then you have to ask yourself, are you being responsible with your body language analysis?
The only reason we haven't done it to now is because this is all there is. But when she's talking about you would be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't think he's the patron saint or whatever it was, I see a little contempt or disdain or something. Did he give too much time to other people? Don't know. But something in that face right there. There's also the possibility, because the way she speaks and the way she moves, that's residual in the way she holds her face. Again, when you look at 9-second clips or 22-second clips, this is really, really hard. And her eye rolling is just illustrators. So I think we got to be careful not to assign anything to her eye rolling and movement. What we have to do is look for a pattern. We're going to get a baseline. The best we can do here, this is again the baseline in this interview, which is chopped to hell. The one place I wish they would not have cut is when she was so annoyed when she said, because he's dead, and there was a cut in there. Man, that would have been great just to leave that little bit alone. But good start. This is what we got. This is what we're going to show you. She needs to be cautious. That's all I got.
What do you think is the...
I just want to say that I picked up what he was saying with regard to her sort of describing John O'Keefe as the patron saint in Canton, and that you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who didn't like him, or like, it's like okay, I know, I was going to say we all know, but I can speak for myself here. I know that there were trust issues in the relationship. It is clear in the text messages that were shared between them. 24 hours before he died. And it is clear that their relationship was coming undone due to the trust issues. And I will say that probably this expert, Greg Hartley, probably he is correct in picking up on that. Maybe Karen Reed was fed up with John O'Keefe spending time with other people and, doing things that she obviously had trust issues with. And again, I'm not faulting her for those trust issues. I feel like more often than not, when there are trust issues in a relationship, it's rarely due to paranoia, unless you're in an abusive relationship. Often there are trust issues when people are in an abusive relationship, because abusive people just by default have trust issues, and it's going to be a toxic relationship no matter what you do. Abusive people have trust issues generally. But I don't see Karen Reed as an abusive person. I think that the trust issues were there because something happened. Something must have happened, and maybe John O'Keefe was partying with people. We don't really know. We don't have the backstory. We just know something happened in Aruba. Karen Reed was uncomfortable with it, and we also know that when Karen Reed never heard back from John O'Keefe after dropping him off at 34 Fairview, we know that she became increasingly frustrated, she became increasingly angry, and then she became increasingly terrified because she genuinely didn't know where he was, and she was realizing like she really doesn't know where he is. He would have gotten back to me by now. So I'm just saying, like, her mind at some point in the evening of January 28th into January 29th, we know through the text messages and through the voicemail messages that Karen Reed's mind went to the possibility that John O'Keefe was having an affair. And again, that to me stems from trust issues in the relationship. I don't think Karen Reed was being paranoid. I don't think she was being like spiteful. I think she genuinely felt like if he's not getting back to her, who is he with? She did not know that he had been beaten up, attacked by a dog, and thrown outside on the lawn to, die from hypothermia. She didn't know all that. So I'm just saying, like Greg picked up on some trust issues, in my opinion, and I just agree with him in that yes, there were trust issues, and maybe there was some disdain, and yes, it had to do with other people that John O'Keefe was hanging out with, and that Karen Reed felt uncomfortable about.
This is one of the worst as far as choppy goes, things being chopped up. What's the best one we've seen where it wasn't choppy? Just to fall on, it was recent. We had a really good one, and I think we commented on that. How it's not focused on the person
Piers Morgan
interviewing.
Yeah, Piers Morgan's
That's
stuff
great
is
job.
always really good.
Yeah.
I mean, for the Prince Andrew interview, is a great one. I mean, that's well shot.
And Spacey just did an interview with Piers Morgan. We'll do again here shortly, where he talks about being on a plane with Bill Clinton, Epstein, and young and underage girls. So
yeah.
Wow. Where's this? When did this happen?
Yesterday, the day before.
Yeah.
We'll do it next week. Great interview.
We'll do it next week.
One of Piers's best, actually.
You've seen it?
He's pretty.
I have. Yeah, it's very good. Yeah,
we'll do it next week. Good. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, very good.
All right.
And it was a good interview with Piers Morgan. I personally don't like Piers Morgan. I think Piers Morgan is a puppet for the corporate media, sensationalism. And I don't think he has a backbone. I think he just sort of pushes narratives. But sometimes he does interviews and I'm like, yes, finally someone called this person out on their shit. But for the most part, Piers Morgan, to me, is a puppet of the media, and I don't trust his ass at all.
Alleging that law enforcement officials in the state committed murder and that they're covering it up. Why would they want to be involved in this?
Because he's dead. I think things went too far. It was late. There was alcohol involved, but they're all family. And there's many of them involved.
After posting bail, Reed has spent much of the past 18 months in and out of court.
For anyone who isn't familiar with the behavior panel, they will do this in all of their videos. They will play a segment of the video, whatever video they're analyzing, and then they will discuss it, and then they'll do the replay of it so that you are able to watch it without their interruption. It's a very thorough way of analyzing a video, but just so you're aware, it's being replayed on purpose, and they will continue to do this.
awaiting a trial date.
And me and my family and my attorneys and my team have marshaled every resource to get to the truth. It just feels like no one else wants it.
Prosecutors allege that Reed hit O'Keefe with her car after getting into an argument earlier in the day, leaving him to die in the middle of a snowstorm in January 2022. But Reed says she had no reason to harm her boyfriend.
I would call him the patron saint of Canton. He was just very selfless, frugal, and I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone that didn't care for John.
Did you meet up again?
He had reached out to me on Facebook and he said, "Hey, blast from the past, how's things?" And when I saw his picture, his profile picture was with several young children, and then it triggered my memory that his sister and his sister's husband had passed away. And he told me, "Yeah, I have the kids now." I admired that. I thought that was amazing.
Soon, Reed says she became part of the family, often sleeping over at O'Keefe's house and helping take care of the kids.
He would go to work and I would stay with his niece and nephew. All of the breaks that the kids had, we did something.
But their relationship also had its struggles. Reeves says O'Keefe had been relying more on her to take care of the kids and that he criticized some of the decisions she made with them.
We had an argument on New Year's Eve. We were away on vacation and he became incoherently drunk. And I ended up ringing in the new year with his niece and nephew. John didn't come back to our room till after 3 a.m. So that was rough. I felt very much taken advantage of. He apologized profusely for what happened on New Year's Eve. And he said, "If you can't get over it, then you need to spend some time at yours. I can't keep apologizing. I don't want to keep rehashing this."
All right, Greg, what do you got?
I'm really short on this one. The eye rolls are emphatic with her. There's sacred space when she's talking about the kids. I think there's probably some, and she tells us, she's going to tell us there's some baggage around how he treated her, about how she treated the kids and that kind of stuff. But we see that. We see her starting to adapt, do that sacred space. I always talk about closing your hands in front of you and rubbing your hands together. We're seeing her releasing nervous energy, trying to adapt, trying to make the uncomfortable comfortable. And then she does a real adapter when she's talking about that argument on New Year's Eve. So there's some baggage here. The thing is, just because there's baggage here doesn't mean that she killed a guy with a car. So if anybody who tells you, well, she rubbed her neck when she's talking about him, so she must have killed him, we call that absolutist, and we know that's BS. Chase, what do you got?
Totally agree. I watched that.
I'm really grateful that he said that, Greg. And it is absolutist. And you will notice that a whole lot of the Karen Reed haters are absolutists. You can't talk to them. You can't give them science. You can't give them accident reconstruction. You can't even give them reverse engineering. Not even if you explain it like you would to a kindergartner. You can't get through to the Karen Reed haters because a lot of them are absolutists. They have made up their minds, and what they've made up their minds with is completely, purely irrational emotion, irrational paranoia. It's not based on science or logic or real accident reconstruction.
This part so many times today, and I thought she bought a new dress. Maybe there's a tag in there, and
Right.
we have no idea. But when she's talking about Facebook and him reaching out to her, she's genuinely smiling and recalling this at the precise emotional point where we would expect, and it's not a full smile. And I'm saying it's not a full smile because that's even harder to fake. This little partial smile at that exact moment is harder to fake because if we're faking smiles, we want to telegraph it. We want people to see it. And she says, I admired that. I thought it was amazing about the kids. There's genuine chin boss movement, which we typically associate with genuine grief or shame or just seeing something that we're feeling down about. And when you see this with downward gazing, it's a great indicator of some kind of grief because you're seeing a cluster and not relying on one single behavior. One thing guilty people will do is disparage the victim. We see this over and over again, especially if you're a subscriber to the channel. You've seen it a lot. They'll provide reasons to dislike the person who's been murdered, albeit pretty covertly and subtly. What they won't hardly ever do is go into a story about the victim doing something irresponsible, then launching into how profusely they apologized for it and how they continue to apologize over time. The way she's explaining all this has smooth cadence, emotional tone shifting up and down at the right moments, and maybe her intensity. And we talk about anger all the time, like innocent people will be angry if they're charged with a crime or accused of something. That could be an explanation for the intensity here. Sorry, my wife and daughter just spun by on the four-wheeler out the window. Distracted.
Speaking of intensity,
Yeah. But her hands are in sync with the words she does, and Scott will show you that maybe hopefully in a minute when it happens on specific. I can't remember something, but everything looks like I might expect it to be, and her eye contact is the same as her baseline. So with the second tip here, if you're a reporter, you're interviewing somebody, ask more open-ended questions. These require more detailed responses and increase the cognitive load. This is the mental processes on the interviewee. Scott, what do you got?
That was amazing. And I agree with him that as Karen Reed is talking about John O'Keefe reaching out to her on social media, she seems to be recalling it with nostalgia, with pleasure. Like she really enjoyed that part in their relationship. And it still brings her happiness just thinking about it, just talking about it. I agree with Chase that it was genuine. Her happiness, her smiles while talking about John reaching out to her, they were genuine. It was genuine. And I love that Chase has consistently so far just been giving Karen Reed the benefit of the doubt, and he's pointing out her body language in a way that shows her innocence. And they keep referring to her as intense and loud. I disagree with these guys on that part. I don't see her as intense. I don't see her. Yes, she's speaking loud. Yeah, I see her as passionate, and maybe it's me who, it takes one to know one. She's passionate, and it's perfectly valid, especially when she's talking about someone she loved, someone she was in a relationship with, someone she helped raise kids with, and someone she's being accused of having murdered. Of course, you are going to be passionate, and maybe intense is subjective. Some people might see it as intense. I see it as passionate.
Yeah. Okay. I think maybe you're confusing her almost melodic. How do you say it? Her voice changing like that. I think we're hearing a volume change in there because her tone doesn't change. It's all like that most of the time. And
I'm not getting it. Could you give us like a 3-second instead of
yeah. How does it sound again?
Well, it's harsh. It's a harsh sound.
What's that Boston accent too that goes with it? Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, it's hardcore and it's spot on.
Karen Reed does not have a Boston accent. I know a Boston accent. She does not have one. She has a different accent.
There for a long time, and it was oof. So we obviously see that big adapter, but I'm with you guys. It could be most anything, but it does show up when she's talking about the fight they were having. But I don't think that would be that bothers me as using that as an adapter, seeing that as an adapter, calling it as one. But I think there is stress there with that, so maybe that's what it is. It's a tough call on that one. She has this really strange tick where her eyes get real wide like that, and we see her hands. She's adapting with her hands. That's definitely going on. But that could be from nervousness because she's being interviewed. She's having to relive this situation that she's being accused of. So there's that. So right now, it could go either way for me at this point. When she said, but the thing that makes it way more toward maybe something's up here is when she talks about him telling her he doesn't want to start rehashing this thing they've gone over before. That's what they're fussing about, is how she keeps bringing stuff up that he did, that he got in trouble for. And he says to her, and he said, I don't want to keep rehashing this. So maybe it's one of those things where she just keeps talking to him and bugging him, and maybe he's just not into it. Maybe she resents him, because I'm feeling like she's resentful toward him for the way things sound. So I don't think their relationship is solid. And I think she's resentful because he's out drinking and hanging out with his buddies and stuff, and she's home watching the kids, and they're not even her kids. So I think that might weigh into this as well. but still, it's a little 50-50 for me right now. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah.
That was an excellent observation from Scott. I agree with him in that she did have resentment. It was clear she had unresolved issues with John O'Keefe, and he had issues with her too. You can see it in his text messages to her, in their correspondences, like how he was kind of short with her. But then by the end of the night, he was like, "I'm going to need you to be my DD, my designated driver." Like, even though he was fed up with her and she with him, they still made plans. Like, to me, it was indicative that even though they were having issues, they were trying to be together. I don't think John was like using Karen Reed just to be his DD. I think John genuinely wanted Karen Reed, but they just had problems. They just needed to work things out. And again, everything I saw in their relationship based on the communications to me seemed natural. It seemed like, yeah, this happens. This happens in relationships. And some people are even meaner than this. In abusive relationships, it gets a lot nastier than this. Like, I didn't see their relationship as abusive. I didn't see someone as having more power than the other. I simply saw a very normal aggravation of someone helping to raise someone else's kids, and they're feeling a little taken advantage of. And maybe John was taking advantage of her. Maybe John did want to have more fun. Maybe he had spent the last 10 years raising his niece and nephew, and he was like, I kind of want to have fun now. They're older now. I kind of want to have fun now. And you're here, you're an adult. You can be home with them. It's like maybe they needed to talk about things more. Maybe he needed a night to himself with the boys or with his friends, and she would have to consent to it and be okay with it. Like, maybe they just never got to that point of balancing John's social life in a way that would allow Karen Reed to continue feeling valued in the relationship rather than being taken advantage of. So I'm just saying, like, I didn't see anything in their arguments that was like a red flag to me. And I've followed a lot of court cases. I've followed a lot of crime cases, especially involving couples, and I didn't see any red flags between them. I just saw them as having arguments, regular arguments. And I can tell red flags. Believe me, I can tell red flags. And I didn't see any red flags from Karen Reed or from John O'Keefe. I understand that some people feel like John O'Keefe shouldn't have gone to 34 Fairview. He was being a bit irresponsible, a bit illogical going to 34 Fairview. Like, if people are egging you on and they're trying to get you to go somewhere because they have a problem with you, why in your right mind would you go? Like, you must know it's going to end up in a fight. But again, who knows why John went? Who knows? But I don't have an issue with John. I don't have an issue with Karen Reed. I don't know them. And I think it's unfair when people try to judge who they are based on what little information we have. Most of the information we have about John O'Keefe and Karen Reed is concentrated within the last 24 hours of their lives. So, I'm just saying, we just all need to be a little more understanding here.
I agree. There's milling around, so there's stress, but it's pretty consistent throughout. There's no massive changes. The potential adaptation on the shoulder there, it comes at the right time if you take into account the word argument. So I agree with that. But Chase, just like you say, could be anything. Could be anything. But surely there should be a little more stress over the idea of argument. So it doesn't seem unreasonable. You're not going to go, oh, she's lying about the argument. No, it suits the idea of argument. Is she lying about something else? Well, nothing else comes at that point. So, that seems to fit for me. I'm okay with that. I do sense a little bit of change in rhythm and cadence within stay with his niece and nephew. Stay with. In that, there's a change. There's a subtle change. Do I think there's something up there? No, I think it's stress, because she is resentful of this. She's setting up a story there of resent. She's clear that she didn't like being left in charge of that and being given that maybe it was presumed she would take responsibility for that. Sounds fair. Interesting. Incoherently drunk. There's a change in rhythm there. Okay, so there's now a little more of a story of here's this person that presumes you're going to look after the kids. You get incoherently drunk at times. And then she says, taken advantage of. And there's a loss of fluency there. She says, taken twice. There's a little thought in there. But again, that loss of fluency seems to fit the whole story that she's setting up there, which is she's now... Well, is she being forced into, with the questioning, to give a representation of, I had a guy who wasn't really, behaving as he should behave, was getting out of hand now and again. And I felt like I was being taken advantage of. I think everything that we're hearing in the subtle changes, and they're really subtle, that are happening there, they seem to fit. So I don't think there's any deception going on here. It's more emotionally accurate for what she's talking about. However, this story then does really set up this person as not the potential angel who she doesn't think anyone would not, like being around. It's kind of twisted the story slightly to that he wasn't perfect. And so, in my view, I'd like to see where are we going to go with this? Is that it's going to move further? Because to your point, Chase, are we starting to see a little bit of a gear shift, a subtle volume change into demeaning this person because we've got to set this person up as a perpetrator of something and reposition herself as a victim of something? We see that often happening with people who are guilty of something. Is it going to happen here? It started to get a little more interesting for me now. There, that's all I've got on that one.
Tie.
No, that was Greg. Greg gave 14%.
Well, look at that expression on his face, man. He's like,
made me laugh.
Greg, wow.
Greg exerted about 14% more effort than usual there.
That's about right. Yeah, that's about right. Which is 12%.
Give it to Greg.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll mark it down in the lean tracker.
Do. Let it show in the record.
Did you meet up again?
He had reached out to me on Facebook and he said, hey, Blast from the Past, how's things? And when I saw his picture, his profile picture was with several young children. And then it triggered my memory that his sister and his sister's husband had passed away. And he told me, yeah, I have the kids now. I admired that. I thought that was amazing.
Soon, Reed says she became part of the family, often sleeping over at O'Keefe's house and helping take care of the kids.
He would go to work and I would stay with his niece and nephew. All of the breaks that the kids had, we did something.
But their relationship also had its struggles. Reeve says O'Keefe had been relying more on her to take care of the kids and that he criticized some of the decisions she made with them.
We had an argument on New Year's Eve. We were away on vacation, and he became incoherently drunk. And I ended up ringing in the new year with his niece and nephew. John didn't come back to our room till after 3 a.m. So that was rough. I felt very much taken advantage of. He apologized profusely for what happened on New Year's Eve. And he said, if you can't get over it, then you need to spend some time of yours. I can't keep apologizing. I don't want to keep rehashing this. Both times.
The point about rehashing, again, that's very normal in any relationship. Couples do that. They especially if something is unresolved, if something is not fixed, if there's a problem that's been looming and it hasn't been resolved, often the natural thing that occurs is that it gets hashed and rehashed because the person looking who keeps bringing it up is looking for a resolve. They're looking for something to fix it. And I could just see Karen Reed like asking for reassurance, asking, for are you sure you weren't cheating? Are you sure nothing happened? If it's like someone can apologize for their actions, but if if the person receiving the apology does not feel like the apology was enough, then it wasn't enough. Some actions, some deeds, an apology is not enough. And, maybe it requires therapy. Maybe it requires rehashing it until both of the people are tired of it and they both agree to move on. Like we've beaten the dead horse. We're never going to get ahead. We just need to agree to disagree and move on. So I'm just saying like that hashing and rehashing things, it's common in relationships. It happens.
I met Brian Albert. He seemed like the type of person that you'd be surprised he's out socially because he doesn't seem like he ever wants to be there.
But at the bar, Reed says there was an invitation to continue hanging out at Albert's home.
I said, can we make sure
That was a great point about Brian Albert. Like, he doesn't seem like someone who does really wants to be there. Like, yeah, like he's a nasty person.
welcome here? Nobody extended the invite to me. I didn't hear the invite extended to you.
They drive to the Alberts' house. What happens next is disputed.
So I pull at the foot of the driveway. It's snowing. John has no coat on. It's windy. So I drop him off. He goes up the driveway and approaches the side door. And as I see him approach the door, I look down at my phone.
Reed says after about 10 minutes of waiting in her car, she became irritated that O'Keefe still hadn't gotten in touch with her. And she drove back to his home where she continued calling him before, she says, she fell asleep around 1:30 in the morning. She then says she woke up before 5 a.m. He still wasn't home. She then started canvassing the neighborhood.
Just going to drive around in the 2 square miles that we spent the preceding night.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
This clip starts off with her baseline. She's talking the same way, moving her head the same way, and everything all the way down to her blink rate, which is how often we blink. We blink more when we're stressed out, is all the same. And she's talking about making sure they're welcome at this house party. As she goes to talk about the evening, a few changes occur while she's talking about the evening. And y'all probably pick up on top of more of these. There's a detail spike, a huge spike in the amount of information going into this. Keep in mind, I think a reasonable, normal person is going to increase detail spikes on things that make them innocent when they're in the middle of a trial if they're accused of something that, especially that they didn't do. So there's the detail spike. There's more staccato shift in her speech. It's more choppy. The gestures are more sharp and immediate, but they're still in sync with her words. There's a huge increase in detail about the driveway and the door. The driveway and the door, ton of detail that you're going to see when this clip comes back on. And there's a shift to present tense instead of past tense for this whole description. Once the detail increases, everything is present tense. He goes into the house. He walks up there. I'm texting him, all of that kind of stuff. Then we have the phone calls. I'm no forensics expert, but if these calls were made that she's talking about in the video, it's very likely she didn't know his whereabouts. And placing all of these calls hints at more toward innocence, especially when you factor in the mental state somebody would be in having just committed a snap judgment murder. The phone calls are hard to calculate in. So when she said we're driving around these 2 square miles that we spent the preceding night, that's way out of baseline. Her shoulders are up, which to her credit is pretty common when somebody in a Western country is explaining themselves. Like, we do this when we're explaining our actions and our behaviors. We put our shoulders up. And the gestures are no longer matching or in sync with her speech at this point. Then there's an asymmetrical shoulder shrug or a single shoulder shrug, which is potentially lacking some confidence there. But I will admit that it's not a huge cluster. Keep in mind there was a cluster there, but it's not near enough as where I would call anything certain. And it's hard when we're not in control of the questions. If you're a reporter and you've got an interview to do like this, and it's a big interview, give us a shout, shoot us an email. We will make you the most incredible list of questions that you've ever seen to get some information up. So technique number 3, if you're a reporter doing interviews, repeat the key questions. So ask the same question at different times in different ways to start spotting inconsistencies in somebody's story. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, okay, so there is a story here. There's another character that comes in, surname of Albert, can't remember his first name, but Albert. And here's the narrative that's put forward, that she's worried, are they welcome in his home? And also back in the bar, a sense of he's somebody who doesn't look like they want to be social. So set up as somebody who's antisocial and masking that antisocial persona, and we're worried, are we going to be welcome in this person's home? So interesting character is brought in of an antisocial person who will mask. I mean, I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's an interesting.
It is so true. Brian Albert, as I've said, is a malignant narcissist. My opinion, again, not a doctor. Brian Albert is a malignant narcissist, and he absolutely fakes charisma like a narcissist. He fakes kindness and cooperation like a narcissist. He knows his place in the courtroom, and he acts like a dog with its tail between its legs, because in the courtroom, because that is the one place that is more powerful than he is. But he is still arrogant. And I'm sure in his personal life, he has power and he wields it. He shows it off. And I believe he was showing it off on January 28th into January 29th, 2022.
Interesting character and narrative to bring in. Let's see what happens with that. So she says, I drop him off. Oh, by the way, it's great to see. Again, it's not easy to find a baseline of the interviewer, but the interviewer is there like this, huge furrows in his forehead. Yeah. She has no furrows in her forehead, but listening to her voice and listening to her intonation and the way she tells this story, and the anxiety is the wrong word, but the intensity is the right word, as was used before. The intensity with which she tells the story, with nothing happening in her forehead, which I assume is going to be Botox doing that. Yeah, anybody would mirror that. Anybody would be there going, really? This happened? Yeah, so amazing to see that mirroring going on there. Anyway, she says, I drop him off, and then we get, Chase, to your point, a spike in detail, which helps us understand why he would die of hypothermia. We get to hear about the snow, and that wasn't really in the questioning. Really? Yep. So, what's that about? Because it is quite nice how it sets up in advance. Oh, here's why he might be found in the snow dead, because there's the possibility of hypothermia set up in advance. Now, what's interesting for me in the story that she tells, she doesn't see him go through the door. She sees him walk up to the door, and then she's looking down, checking her phone. And ultimately, that has to be the last she ever saw of him. She doesn't see him, as she describes, go into the house. And yet there's some concern about this, but I guess there's an argument going on at the same time, I guess. So it's unsure exactly what went on here. Why didn't you watch him go in? If concerned, why didn't you see him go in? Why did you decide to drive off at that moment? Why look at your phone and not see him go on? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but we don't get a chance to ask any questions. So,
I feel personally that if Karen Reed is texting John and waiting for him outside of 34 Fairview, I feel that she must at some point look up at the door to see if he's coming outside. Like, if he's not responding to her while she's texting him and she knows he walked to the door, she's assuming he walked inside. But I'm just saying, like, there must have been a point that she looked at the door again, because I'm saying that's what I would do. Like, if I'm texting someone, I'm not sure what the plan is. I thought they were just going there to check things out. I thought I was going to be invited in, or maybe I am giving him a ride home. He's not getting back to me. I'm confused. I'm just like sitting there waiting. He's drunk. he's incoherent, something's going on. I feel like while I'm sitting there for 10 minutes, which I think that's how long Karen Reed was sitting out there, five to 10 minutes or so, I believe that I would have at some point looked up at the door to see if, well, he's not responding to me, but maybe he's coming outside. Is he coming outside? I would just naturally check the door. So I just feel like, yes, there's probably a lot of detail there. That there are probably things Karen Reed did do. She probably did see him go inside. She probably did look at the door after he went inside, to see if he was still there or to see if he was coming back out. There's so much detail there that we can't really know unless we ask Karen Reed ourselves.
Our understanding kind of leaves us there. That's all I got on that one. Scott, what you got?
Yeah, one of my favorite things in the world is lateral logic, those little puzzles you get, Steve and Kendra died, whatever, but they were goldfish and they flipped out of that kind of thing. They're real simple, but they're really great. So I really like those. And she's not trying to do it on purpose, but what this is sort of turned into, because we have a picture in our mind of him going in the house. And you're right, Mark, because she says, I watched him approach the door. She didn't, which is something odd to say, that sounds odd to me. I saw him approach the door. Really? Well, you're no kidding. But she didn't say she saw him go in. But you assume he did because that's what we've all done for years and years. Growing up, you walk up to a door and you go right in it. So I think that's odd, especially since they've been fighting up to that point. Because he got out of the car and he was mad. And she was mad too. Because she talks about how they were fussing in there. She talks so loud.
Unnecessary language. Like when I first started learning writing, I wrote this sample paragraph and I was like, he reached out his hand to turn the doorknob, and the feedback I got back was like, was there another body part that person was going to use? And just say,
how else is going to open the door, right? He opens the door.
And you're absolutely right. I heard that exact same thing in there.
Yeah, Steve Coogan does that, Mark, in some of his things where you can tell he's the one supposed to be filming it and setting it up because it shows him going out to the car, putting his hand on it, opening it up, putting the key in, turning it, and all that, and all he's doing is going to the car and leaving. It's hilarious. So anyway, she talks so loud, it's like she's yelling the whole time. Her volume goes way up, and her cadence stays the same. It just the tone and cadence just go dink and just keep going the whole time. It's hard to listen to her. I think that's why he's got that guy's look on his face, because it's so loud. Maybe I don't like loud things, and she is. I think that may be bugging him. That's what it looks like to me anyway. But she does say she's mad at him, and then she's so mad at him because he hasn't texted her for 10 minutes or something. She goes home. She decides to go home after dropping him off. And then she wakes up and goes out hunting for him at 5 o'clock in the morning. She doesn't go back to the house where she left him. She doesn't start there. That's literally the last place she goes is to the house where she left him, right? If you get mad at your wife for whatever reason, if you're going to do that, I could do it, and then leave, and you wouldn't expect her to be walking home through the neighborhood or anybody else. Why would you be canvassing the neighborhood? It's ridiculous. You wouldn't be, but you need an
But to be fair, they need to know the proximity between 34 Fairview and 1 Meadows, between Brian Albert's house and John O'Keefe's house, which isn't that far. So I'm just saying it's not that... Just saying, guys, do some research. It's not that far-fetched that he would walk home if he's drunk and he's mad at Karen Reed. Yeah, I think it's natural for her to assume he walked home because he did not want a ride from her because he was that pissed at her. Again, it's natural. And if he wasn't responding to her, she's assuming that he's pissed at her. She's assuming that he's cheating on her. She's assuming that the worst thing is happening. So I'm just saying I would drive around too, and I would be reluctant to go back to Brian Albert's house because I know they don't like me. So I'm just saying I would drive around, and if I didn't see him, then I would go back to Brian Albert's house and ask what's going on.
So that's to maybe sober up or something, but whatever the excuse is, but That's odd. That's really odd to be out canvassing the neighborhood when your husband's missing, or when you know where you left him, but you don't go there first. So I thought that was really odd. This just isn't rational thought going into this. It's a great story. She's doing a great job, but taking into consideration what you two guys have said so far, and I'm sure Greg may add to it, this doesn't sound like it happened this way at all. It sounds like she got mad, and then he got out of the car and she left. Maybe something happened between the time she left or whatever. Who knows? That's why we're sitting where we're sitting. Greg, what do you got?
But we know that's not true. And again, if these guys would do some research, they would know that's not true. John O'Keefe got out of the car. His cell phone data proved he went inside the house, and it was also proven that Karen Reed was sitting there for a while. She pulled her SUV up and she sat there for a while. And other people arrived after her. People were arriving as she arrived, and they were still arriving and leaving while she was sitting there. Again, if she had done what the prosecution said she did, then people would have seen it. People arriving there would have seen it. People leaving there would have seen it. So again, just do some research.
Add one more data point. We always talk about lies of omission being and then. Well, she says, I watched him approach the door and then I looked at my phone. Okay, what happened between... Now, this is a micro interview. This is the only reason that you would do this is because she used a time hiding phrase or time hiding pause there. What I would do is say, okay, let's talk about that. What happened between the time you saw him at the door and tell me exactly where he was and the time you looked at your phone? Well, nothing. Okay, good. Then we'll just keep moving on. But if in fact she backed over him and didn't include that, then we would miss that. So we have to, anytime somebody's hiding time, we have to go through it. But I'm on the same page. You guys all are. Let's also talk about her for just a minute. I want you to go back and watch these videos and listen for where the intensity in her discussion is. It's never around facts. It's always around people. I would venture to say this woman is probably really intense with people and may not be liked by some of his cop buddies, number one, because all the details, listen to that. When she's talking about this cop and he wasn't really a people person, there's a ton of detail that's not necessary there. She could have just said, I didn't really like him. And then she says the 2 times we met, there's a whole lot of details. There's not a whole lot of details about the house. I watched him approach the door. We're all on the same page. Never said he went through. That's an allusion to something. Let him do it. And there's logic failure here around not going back to the house. And the first time we have heard her stammer, she's well-spoken. She's like a machine. Bam, 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 bam. Until she gets to that point about canvassing the 2 miles and then she stammers. That don't look good. Now we got a cluster. And one of my favorite things we don't see often enough on here is she turtles when she does it. And we say turtling, her neck is shrinking down in her head, protecting. Chase, you talk about all the time. One of our first things that we do is protect all those arteries to protect us from being killed by cats, I think Joe said. But this whole thing feels like she's timeline masking. Does that mean she killed the guy? Don't know. But what that does make me think is she might not even remember exactly what's happening. If this video were not so edited, we would have a better feel. But one of my favorite...
I agree. I think that's more likely that she doesn't really know what she did that morning. Obviously, she knows she didn't kill anybody. And initially, she was even willing to take responsibility if, in fact, she accidentally hit John O'Keefe with her SUV. Remember, that's where the phrase comes from. It came from Karen Reed. Could I have hit him? And she admits to that. And again, that's not someone who is guilty. That's not someone who's trying to hide what they did. Brian Albert and Nicole Albert and Jennifer McCabe and Matt McCabe and Brian Higgins, all of them, every single one of them tried to hide what they did. They literally tried to hide it. They destroyed evidence. They deleted searches, messages, phone calls, butt dials, right? There were just butt dials, but the cell phone data says that somebody answered and the phone call lasted for so many seconds. Oh, but they were butt dials. Like, all of those people, those MFers, they all lied and they all were overtly, obviously hiding things. Karen Reed has maintained a consistent openness about what she did. what was going on, what their troubles were, what their fight was about. John O'Keefe apologized profusely. John O'Keefe didn't want to keep rehashing it. She's not hiding anything. She's defending herself, yes, as she should, because the judicial system will eat you alive if you don't defend yourself. But I don't see a guilty conscience. I see someone who maybe doesn't remember everything that happened, and whether or not she did drive around looking for him, to me, is irrelevant. It's because she didn't do anything, so it doesn't really matter what she did that morning. It was proven that he was never hit by the SUV, so it doesn't really matter what she did, in my opinion.
Things. She just locked herself into the most finite time frame on earth. Because when she says, he walked to the door and I looked at my phone, you know what my next question would have been? What time was it? Because that's the first thing she would have seen on her phone. And then I would be able to go back and timestamp and prove whether she's telling the truth or not. She's put herself in a box right here. And if they get her on the stand and somebody does this and starts locking her down here, it'll be interesting to see what kind of data they have to back it up. This is the first time I thought, maybe something happened. In the beginning, you're like, okay, she's grumpy, she's kind of, intense, but this makes her not look believable to me right here. That's all I got.
Oh wow, there's two new ones there. Chase, that was good. Mark, this whole looking like a scholar thing. Let's go with that.
But also because I knew my hands would catch the light.
That sun, man.
The sun.
There you go, with that sun.
You gotta go.
Look at that, just finding the light.
Both times I met Brian Albert, he seemed like the type of person that you'd be surprised he's out socially, because he doesn't seem like he ever wants to be there.
But at the bar, Reed says there was an invitation to continue hanging out at Albert's home.
I said, can we make sure we're welcome here? Nobody extended the invite to me. I didn't hear the invite extended to you.
They drive to the Alberts' house. What happens next is disputed.
So I pull at the foot of the driveway. It's snowing. John has no coat on. It's windy. So I drop him off. He goes up the driveway. And
I will also say that maybe the loud talking is a Massachusetts thing too, because I know someone personally who was born and raised in Massachusetts, and they talk loud, and often we are out in public and I'm like, you don't have to be so loud, like it's so I'm just saying, like, yes, Karen Reed is loud, and I could just see myself somewhere and saying, hey, you don't have to talk that loud, it's okay, like I'm right next to you. But again, I know someone who grew up, who was born and raised in Massachusetts, still lives here, and they talk loud like Karen Reed. I don't know. It could be a regional thing. Who knows? But I also think that maybe sometimes loud people don't know that they're loud.
approaches the side door. And as I see him approach the door, I look down at my phone.
Reed says after about 10 minutes of waiting in her car, she became irritated that O'Keefe still hadn't gotten in touch with her. And she drove back to his home, where she continued calling him before, she says, she fell asleep around 1:30 in the morning. She then says she woke up before 5 a.m. He still wasn't home. She then started canvassing the neighborhood.
Just going to drive around in the 2 square miles that we spent the preceding night.
How soon was it when you pulled in there that you saw John's body?
Immediately. And what struck me when I saw him was his mouth was open a little bit and his eyes were shut, and he had spots of blood in different areas on his face.
O'Keefe was taken to the hospital and pronounced dead. He died from blunt force trauma and hypothermia. And it wasn't long before Reed became the #1 suspect. Authorities say they had noticed a cracked taillight after they seized her car.
I had told both Jen and Carrie that I cracked my taillight. I said I just hit my car on top of everything, but I didn't look at the damage. And both women said, it's cracked, it's cracked. Calm down, you cracked your taillight. You're okay, let's go look for John.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
So if you go back and look at video 3, the video we just did, and I know Terry's, but if you go back and look at video 3, you'll see the only time she furrows her brow in this entire thing is about the interchange between her and the other cop. We don't see her furrow her brow. She has the capability, but it has to be something pretty intense for her. Well, pretty intense would be about finding your dead boyfriend. In my opinion, I would think we'd see something, nothing. Now, does that mean she killed him? No. Could mean that she was so angry and it's been 2 years and. But if you just look at that one intensity, that one single intensity is around a personality issue with somebody she does not like, and this doesn't show it. The other thing is there's an out of baseline response to the question for how soon did you see his body. To this point, she's been pretty good at pause, answer, boom, immediately before the question's even out of the guy's mouth. That's different. Something's different. There's also a change in eye contact as he starts talking about the cracked tail light. When he starts talking about the cracked tail light, you see that eye lock that we haven't seen to now. So here's the thing. We don't know. This could be an and story, not an or story. Did you back over him? Or did you hit a car? Could be an and story, not one or the other. And it could be that she backed into the car. And this will be interesting to see how the prosecution plays it out and how the defense plays it out, because their stories are wildly different.
To me, she is looking directly at the interviewer with that straight look as she's talking about the cracked taillight. To me, to sort of emphasize like Carrie Roberts and Jen McCabe saw my cracked taillight. Like they saw it. Like it was cracked. Like she's trying to like convince the interviewer they saw that it was just cracked and it was fine. Like that's how it's coming across to me. And the intensity with the forehead thing when she's talking about Brian Albert, I think it's justified. If she doesn't like Brian Albert, good. She should not like Brian Albert because he was absolutely involved and he lied about his involvement. And I don't like Brian Albert too. I would be doing a lot worse talking about Brian Albert.
If you're watching, the prosecution is saying she backed into him, she went home, did all this, and backed into a car and came back and had her friends look for 2 miles. And the defense is saying, no, these cops killed him, beat him to death in the basement and took him upstairs and left him out. So this is an interesting kind of one for us to look at. And there's no real smoking gun. Again, all this edited video, you guys are going to see a ton more stuff than I even just brought up. But the 2 things to pay attention to, well, 3 things. There's no forehead involvement, although she had it for the last guy. There's an out of baseline response to that question, and there's a change in eye contact. I would really be interested in asking her why. And I have a theory, but I'm not going to bring it up yet. Scott, what do you got?
And just another comment that to me, Karen Reed is sitting with her legs crossed and her hands folded, like her hands interlinked, her fingers interlinked. To me, it's a tense position. She's tight. She's like protecting herself, and she immediately answers the question immediately. Like that was her response, that she saw John O'Keefe's body immediately. And she says it in a way that to me is kind of like with certainty. And she says it like, to me, she says it honestly, genuinely, and it's real. And she's tight in that moment. She's tense in that moment. And it makes me believe her that she saw his body and she's recalling it. You can see her eyes move to the side. She's recalling the memory. She's probably picturing him as she's talking about him, and just how terrible that must be. How terrible that must be to have that image in her mind probably for forever.
All right, let's not forget what we're talking about here. She is drunk. She's mad. She's out driving around, backing into things, hitting cars or whatever she hit. So did she leave a note on the car? Obviously not. Whatever she hit, she didn't even get out and check it to see what the damage was. So what's up with that?
It's her car.
She backed into her own car?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well then, okay. Wrong about that. Where did you hear?
Again, they need to do a little bit of research, or maybe like don't do a body language video on the Karen Reed case just because you're trying to get in on the trend. Maybe wait until the facts come through, because this is rather irresponsible coming from body language experts. You got to know how Karen Reed cracked her taillight. You can't and you can't say she was drunk. First of all, why would John O'Keefe make her his DD if she was drunk? And yeah, the prosecution allegedly tested Karen Reed's alcohol level. I'm not sure their alcohol test was legit because nothing else they did was legit. You'll notice in the trial, what's up with all the evidence? Not very believable, not convincing. So I'm not convinced Karen Reed was drunk. And again, the fact that John O'Keefe entrusted her to be his DD to me also means she wasn't drunk. She must have known her limit. She must have known she was driving a brand new Lexus SUV. Brand new, guys. Like I'm just saying, like, I don't think she would willingly go somewhere drunk driving her SUV. You know, sure, she backed into John's car as she was leaving. Yeah, she backed into it. But it's a big SUV, and some of those reverse cameras don't show all the angles. I'm just saying, like, but anyway, these guys should have known. They should have known what she backed into, how she cracked her taillight, and this body language video to me was a bit premature.
That.
She said she backed into her car earlier.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, anyway, so there she is backing.
She didn't back into her car. She backed into John O'Keefe's car while driving her car.
Into things, and so that apparently breaks her tail out. I don't have a problem with that. That's fine. But why is she, again, I'm going to go back to why is she driving around this neighborhood doing that? Why doesn't she just go right to the house? This whole thing, for this one, I have such a little part in this because I'd say it seems obvious to me, but at this point, I'm kind of in on things are looking fairly iffy for her. The picture she's created doesn't sound plausible to me, the way we're looking at all this. Chase, what do you got?
It would be different. No, you got to have all the info, Scott. You got to have all the info. Like, was Karen Reed friends with Brian Albert and Nicole Albert? Had Karen Reed ever gone to their house before January 28th, 2022? Like, or 2020, yeah, 28th into the 29th. It was so late in the evening, it was practically the 29th. So I'm just saying, where's the background story? You need the background story in order to understand her actions here. She likely did not feel comfortable going to 34 Fairview because maybe she knew that Brian Albert didn't, or she didn't like him, or the Alberts overall, and the McCabe's didn't really like her. I'm just saying, obviously she didn't go straight there, and there's a reason for it, and it's very likely that she did not feel welcomed there. Again, that wouldn't be my first place either. It would be the neighborhood because it's within walking distance. And yes, it's a snowstorm. Yes, he didn't have a coat, but some people do that in Massachusetts. They walk around in a t-shirt when it's snowing outside. Just saying, it's not far-fetched to me living here, knowing how people are around here. None of this is too far-fetched to me. It seems perfectly reasonable. And again, if you didn't feel welcomed at 34 Fairview, it's not going to be the first place you think to go. I'm just saying, and think about it. Think about the thought process in that. Like, if you really think it through and you show up to their house at 34 Fairview at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's still dark outside in January. At 5 o'clock in the morning, it's still dark outside, and there's snow on the ground. It's the weather's horrible. It's freezing. It's just not a good look. And you're going to go up and say, hey, my boyfriend never came home last night. Have you seen him? What are you doing? You are inviting people that you don't know or you don't like into your personal problems because you don't know where your man is. And it's a little embarrassing that you don't know where your man is, I'm just saying, think about it in that way too. Think of all the reasons why someone wouldn't want to go to 34 Fairview from the get. Especially when you consider the relationship or the lack of a relationship that Karen Reed had with the homeowners of 34 Fairview.
I'm going to just try to stick only to behavior. And her language that she uses is associative language. She says his eyes, his mouth, his face, instead of the mouth, or just there's snow on that mouth, or the mouth was covered in snow. And
Remember how Brian Albert talked about Chloe? Remember how Nicole Albert even talked about Chloe? They disassociated the fuck out of it. They referred to Chloe as it repeatedly, especially Brian Albert. It. Like, what the hell? You had this dog for 7 or 8 years.
language can suggest a personal connection or a deep emotional engagement with the subject. There could be reasons that she's not emotional about this story. She's told it 500 times. She's going to court. She's getting prosecuted for it or charged with murder for it. We don't know. There's a very strange shift here, though, in her behavior, and it's a shift from her baseline. There's a massive increase in the speed of her gestures. There's a shift of focus to details about innocence, which I will give her. It's contextual because she is being directly asked about this, I think. She uses all the people's names, including John's, which is a good sign, but something is off here. She's not once used any of this behavior before, but this deviation from baseline isn't as severe as maybe thousands of times that we've seen in other people that were guilty. It's just not that severe as what we usually see. And pro tip number 4, if you're an interviewer, focus on the details. Ask about specific times, places, and actions to increase stress. I don't think he directly asked her the question, did you do this in this interview? I didn't see it. And as a quick bonus, ask the bait question. If you're a reporter, get good at the bait question. Here's all you need to do if you're a reporter. Is there any reason that someone would come forward and say blank? Or is there any reason that blank, a video, whatever, audio recording, whatever, might surface in the future? That's it. That's the bait question.
You ruined my number 5. I was told my whole thing's about the bait question. For number 5.
You know, it's funny. I wish you could see mine because my number 5 actually says plant to get a bait question start to work. That's yeah. We all are on this one.
Well,
Chase, I knew you'd bring it up.
I'll just be doing number 5 then. I'll just
just be.
That's
Mark.
only one of my points.
just be me.
Great call. I knew you would do it.
Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. Look, here's what isn't associated here is for me any good reasoning as to why the tail light is cracked. She just puts forward, that I cracked my tail light. But so we've got a who, like she, that I cracked my tail light. So that could be associative to my car and my car's tail light is cracked, not that she actually cracked it. But why? Like when? Where? Exactly. We've got a what, which is a cracked tail light, but exactly why, where, when, that we don't have. So why even this detail? Why is it even pertinent? Why is it pertinent that she says anything about the tail light? She's looking for her boyfriend. She's got friends.
Again, Mark, if there was some research done, there would be an answer to your question. Again, I think it's just more indicative that this body language video was done prematurely. It wasn't Karen Reed backing into her own car. It was Karen Reed backing into John O'Keefe's car.
We got to get this person found. Oh, by the way, I've cracked my tail light. What's pertinent about that? Unless you're setting up a story. Now I'm not saying that that's happening.
Or again, if they understood the prosecution's official narrative, they would know that the taillight was supposed to be a key piece of evidence against Karen Reed. Remember the same taillight that the state troopers manipulated and broke even more? Like, they should be charged with that, by the way. They should absolutely be charged with damaging Karen Reed's vehicle, damaging her property when she had only cracked it, backing into John O'Keefe's vehicle. That's all she did. And then when the state troopers took it to the Sally Port, they messed it up even more and damaged it. Again, it was a brand new Lexus SUV. And that's how like vile they were. That's how psychopathic they were. They just like screw her and screw her car and screw everything. Like zero value for human life. Absolutely zero value for human life. These guys who are in law enforcement and are supposed to be protecting and serving the public. Like they have zero value for human life, and they are psychopaths.
I'm just confused as to why it's pertinent at all, and then why, if it is pertinent, the friends don't go, well, how'd you do that? When did you do that? How? What? Well, I did this. Why did you back into that? Like, what was going on with you? Well, I was drunk. I was really drunk. There's so much missing here. Now, there's so much missing from the interview in general, and who knows what questions were asked and what's missing. And whether actually this is just a news item to make us go, well, there's stuff going on here and we can't answer the questions and it's just engaging. And actually, in the raw footage there, all the answers are there. Who knows? Who knows? Because we don't get to see the raw footage.
Right. It could be the fault of that network piecing it together the way they did to make people suspicious and to, how mainstream media does, the sensationalism. Ooh, right? Like let's completely omit the facts and make people go crazy questioning. Yeah, like good job, network. That's why I can't stand mainstream media.
Could be an absolute great teaser of a news item to make us all go, oh, I know what happened here. And actually on the floor of the editing studio, all the information is there. I don't know.
Right,
but
you have to be a shitty person to piece it together like that when all the answers are there. And it's just the news network creating a story that goes viral because it's so ambiguous on purpose. And so people put in the missing pieces themselves. Right? That's what naturally happens. If something's purposefully ambiguous, people will tend to put in the missing pieces themselves. It's a bad idea, but again, mainstream media does it all the time. They omit facts because if they omit it, it's not like they're lying. They just omitted it, right? Stupid.
But certainly, I'm at a loss as to why mention the tail light and then why not give us more about that, but why mention in the first place?
How soon was it when you...
And I apologize to anyone who's triggered by this panel. If you're thinking they should have educated themselves more about the case before they did this video, I am 100% in agreement with you.
Old in there that you saw John's body?
Immediately. And what struck me when I saw him was his mouth was open a little bit and his eyes were shut and he had spots of blood in different areas on his face.
O'Keefe was taken to the hospital and pronounced dead. He died from blunt force trauma and hypothermia. And it wasn't long before Reed became the number one suspect. Authorities say they had noticed a cracked taillight after they seized her car.
I had told both Jen and Kerry that I cracked my taillight. I said, I just hit my car on top of everything, but I didn't look at the damage. And both women said, it's cracked. It's cracked. Calm down. You cracked your taillight. You're okay. Let's go look for John.
Firefighter said that you said, I hit him. I
said, I hit him. It was preceded by a did and proceeded by a question mark. What I thought could have happened was that did I incapacitate him unwittingly, somehow, and then in his drunkenness, passed out?
When you walked out of the bar, how many drinks had you had?
I had probably about 4.
The Commonwealth says that you had 9 drinks that night. That's what the prosecution says.
I don't believe they're saying I wasn't in my right mind.
They were saying you were intoxicated. Is it possible that you might have hit him unwittingly in your admittedly very large SUV?
No, not possible.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. As a general rule, if you ever ask anybody how many drinks they had and they reply, I had about 4, then they had way more than 4. Like way more than 4. Anytime you hear that, it's so many more than 4. So we know, and I think she maybe does change and give us a better number. Oh no, the court, the state or whatever had worked out the intoxication to around about, what did they say, about 9 or something like that?
9, yeah,
which is either accurate or inaccurate, but essentially, yeah, it's way more than 4. It's way more than 4.
It's not. It wasn't way more than 4. Again, this is just a bit irresponsible, and again, we can't really trust what the state said as to her alcohol level. Yes, the video shows Karen Reed receiving drinks. We don't know exactly what those drinks are. We don't know if some of those drinks are just water. We don't know. It's all speculation. And again, I trust nothing from the prosecution at this point. They planted evidence, they manipulated evidence, they destroyed evidence, and they allowed witnesses on the stand who should have never been allowed on the stand. And they completely ignored true expert witnesses that were part of ARCA and who were hired by the FBI and the DOJ. The prosecution completely disregarded the FBI and the DOJ's involvement in figuring out how John O'Keefe actually died. So I trust 0 from the prosecution, including the alleged alcohol level that they said Karen Reed had. I do not trust it.
So interesting. Did I incapacitate him unwittingly and then in his drunkenness pass out? So unwitting incapacitation, then in his drunkenness, he passes out. And then we've already got this story of hypothermia, essentially. So that if you add those stories together, it's much less likely that you can say, oh, you killed him, because she unwittingly incapacitates him. And then it's his drunkenness that causes his passing out. And then it's the earth that freezes him and kills him. So, essentially nice method potentially of distancing herself from somebody's death. I'm not saying she murdered him, but good distancing from the death. So an accidental hit, but his intoxication leads to death. Probably about 4. There's a lot of uncertainty there. Well, it's full of uncertainty, really. But then at the end, did she hit him? She says, no, not possible. So how can you have all that uncertainty and then at the end go, no, that's not possible?
Because initially she was humble enough to say, could I have hit him? Because she does have a large SUV. And she did see him walk up to the door, and her head was down looking at her phone. And maybe he did try to go to her SUV. I'm just speaking like someone who would been driving that night and would have been driving a big old SUV. Like, these are all possibilities. If my eyes are on my phone and I'm looking down, could he have been behind my vehicle and I didn't even realize because my eyes were on my phone? And could I have backed into him or something while I was trying to move or something? I don't know, but that's what a humble, innocent person asks in a situation like this. They don't completely avoid personal responsibility like Brian Albert and Nicole Albert, who completely avoided personal responsibility. Jennifer McCabe as well. Karen Reed was willing to take responsibility if in fact it was her who caused John O'Keefe to suffer and to ultimately die. But when she says not possible, it must be that it's because she knows by this point in the interview, by this point in her life, she must know about the ARCA accident reconstructionist and the biomechanical engineer who completely exonerated her, who were paid for by the FBI and the DOJ, who completely and purely determined that John O'Keefe was never hit by an SUV using science, using real science, unlike the prosecution. So I'm saying Karen Reed starts out that day, January 29th. She starts out humble and being willing to accept personal responsibility if in fact she did this. But later, when she discovers that there was actually an independent investigation conducted and her lawyers were informed about it, you know, like by the point this interview is aired, she must know that there's actually scientific proof that she didn't do it. So for her to say not possible, it's because actually it's not possible. And we all know that now. Anyone understanding this case legitimately, anyone understanding this case logically, anyone who maybe, I don't know, trusts science over opinion, over irrational liars who clearly covered something up, understands that Karen Reed didn't do this. It's not possible.
Because you've already asked the question, did I unwittingly hit him? So surely it's a possibility. The answer should be, yeah, as I stated before, I worry about the possibility of that. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And it's very energized, isn't it? It's very passionate. So is she protesting too much? Greg, what do you got on this one?
Couple of things that I noticed. Again, she's people focused. The reason she said no, it's not possible is because he said, is it possible? She's feeding what he asked. Exactly what he asked is the reason she said no, it's not possible. She has way too much eye contact in this point. Scott and I had the thing in the True Crime Workshop called the Romancer, where you're paying real close attention, making sure the person is buying what you're doing. Even if you don't believe that, watch her eyes. As her head moves, her eyes stay locked on the guy. It's kind of crazy compared to the first one. There's another baseline deviation, Mark. You covered it. I love how much you have. She even stumbles over 4. Yeah. I won't go through all those pieces, but there's a long fishing vowel in there. There's a stumble over probably. There's about. How much more conditioning do you need? And then there's an entire baseline deviation in body language at 4. She pulls her feet back under her. You know, we pull our resources under us when they're in danger. She pulls her feet back under her at one point when he starts poking on the issue. She doesn't answer the question when he says, they said you had 9 drinks. If I hadn't had 9 drinks and you said they said you had 9 drinks, I'd say that's a lie. No, I had 4. I know how much it was. She doesn't. She says they're not trying to say I wasn't in my right mind. Rest assured, unless you're 9 feet tall and 600 pounds, 9 drinks probably put you well over the legal limit to be driving a car. And you just admitted that, whatever the case. And I don't think she's a huge person to start with. She avoids these questions. And then I think what happens is this kind of thing becomes kind of an existential issue for her. This is where I think the whole thing is hidden. She doesn't know what happened, likely, because if you had 9 drinks, it's going to be shadowy and it's going to be that kind of thing. I'm not saying she would black out. We don't know that. But you would probably not have really good questions. And Chase, here's where I think the bait question would work wonderfully. Not in this interview. But if I was sitting in a room and talking to her, I'd say, look, we know X happened. We know Y happened. Is there any reason any of his DNA would be on the back of that car? Is there any reason you might find something he was carrying at that moment? Is there any reason? In fact, what the state has said is that his cocktail glass has fragments of glass on the bumper of this vehicle. So there's a whole lot of that. And then you give her a lesser charge and you'd probably get her back in because she is conditioning the hell out of whether or not she did anything. Mark, to your point, when a person does that, when they telegraph the earth did it and all this kind of thing, you probably can get that person with a bait question pretty quickly because they're starting to feel some kind of guilt or remorse or whatever. Doesn't mean she did this. We can't tell that. This is so chopped up. It's very, very tough. Chase, what do you got?
I'm no forensics expert. I drive a Bronco. And if I stuck a piece of cocktail glass on my bumper and then deliberately back into another vehicle, I think that glass would fall off. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it would. But this one's interesting. First, we're seeing her in one moment stop using her name or even a pronoun to describe him. So, as a quick lesson in the science of this, with guilty people, the person's name is the first to start disappearing. Pronouns are the second thing to start disappearing. So there's two layers there. Both of them go away, but only for 1 minute. And it's only in one specific area. When she says, did I incapacitate him unwillingly? And then in his drunkenness, like Mark was saying, passed out. Her hand reflexively goes to her chest here. I'm just afraid to hit my mic, so I would do what she did. But and people tend to do this during three types of statements: when they're being vulnerable, when they're more open than usual, or overly sincere. And I'll let you decide what you see right here. But here's why this video is interesting. Her deception about the number of drinks she had is so flipping obvious. There's a loss of fluency. There's hesitancy. There's lip compression. There's chin boss movement. There's immediate mouth closure following a statement, which we look for, and that is not in her baseline at all. And her eyes narrow, which is the opposite of this wide-eyed thing she's been doing her whole baseline time. Her eyes narrow, which isn't a common deception indicator until you have somebody with a baseline that has this giant eyes things. Here's my question. If her deception about something as silly as drinks was so obvious that we could spot it from 100 yards away, where is the obviousness about the other stuff? Interesting here. It's just one data point, but there's chin boss movement, this little muscle right here about the grief and shame that we talked about earlier, at the end when she's saying it's not possible. So very interesting. It's starting to point to, like, it looks more like someone who can't remember what they did or they're not sure about what they did, which, if it is a trap, if she is being framed, it's the perfect candidate. It's the perfect situation to do that in. So as a quick,
that's an excellent point by Chase. That the McCabe's and the Alberts must have been cheering when Karen Reed said the phrase, "Could I have hit him?" Like, they must have been cheering because they were covering something up from the beginning. They were lying from the beginning. And for him to say that Karen Reed is a perfect candidate for someone to be framed, if people are trying to frame someone, she's the perfect candidate because she'll admit to something, or she'll be willing to admit to something because that's how honest she is. That's how open and humble she is. She's willing to blurt out the words, "Could I have hit him?" And that's just what the McCabe's and the Alberts needed to complete their lie, to carry it home. And that's very sad that Karen Reed was probably the most genuine and authentic of them all, and she was taken advantage of for that reason, because none of them are genuine. None of them have a decent bone in their body, and they saw her as a perfect scapegoat.
pro tip here, number 5, ask what happened in reverse order. Not from front to back, go back to front. This technique is effective because recounting events in reverse disrupts anything that's rehearsed, any narrative that's rehearsed. So it increases cognitive load, and it makes it way more difficult for deceptive people to keep their stories straight, and it exposes inconsistencies and reveals the truth. So if you've rehearsed something forward 5,000 times, like the alphabet, it's still hard to say backwards. Scott, what do you got?
I agree with you. And the key to get them to tell the story backwards, you don't say, okay, let's start from the back and go back to the front. You've got to do it subtly. You've got to start asking them questions and then scooch right up next to the end and say, what was going on right before that? And you do that for each part of that, because the memories you have that happen in an event they're linear, and they're locked together with emotions and the things that happened during those times. That's why you remember them in that linear fashion. But when you take out the emotions you had at the end and you go to that block before that, That emotion doesn't connect it this way; it connects it that way, or I guess the opposite. If you're since I'm the other way around. So that's key. I think that's really important. I thought this would be a good spot to bring in the bait question. That's why my whole thing was shot in the foot when Chase mouthed off about it in the video before this.
Like an ignoramus.
My aunt used to call it ignoramus.
One pro tip, though, with that going backwards, if you're doing this, use your left hand and move to your right. This is the way that their timeline works. So in your timeline, you're going past to present, but you're going backwards for them. So as you're asking these questions, start moving your hands a little bit further to your right, and it helps them go backwards in time, and it makes it look more fluid and natural.
Here's a pro tip. Stay out of my time. I'll just sit on this.
Here's a pro tip.
Where was I? I'm at the end here. So you guys covered everything. I could rehash and go over stuff, but it's going to be just so boring again. I know I say that a lot, but I got nothing by the time you guys are done. But I will tell you what bothered me when she says, could I have unwittingly incapacitated him? I think that's important there.
Severity softening.
I think we're there.
They are. Those are tough words to get out, aren't they? Unwittingly incapacitated.
Because
I used to listen to that band all the time.
Her vernacular is that of an attorney or a cop. That's the way she's talking. Yep. Because she was married or hanging out with one, and she hangs out with an attorney, or maybe she's an attorney.
She's also a financial analyst for Fidelity. So she works in that world.
And I think she's been going through these proceedings for a while.
Yeah.
How long has this been going on?
She's in Boston. She's in Boston.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think so.
Oh, I did.
She talks like it. When she says we marshaled all of our support.
Okay.
Yeah. Everybody.
Again, they're exaggerating about her non-existent Boston accent. Karen Reed does not have a Boston accent. She has an accent, but it's ever so slight.
Talks that way there. I forget where it was. Anyway.
You sent her vernacular, and I just thought I'd give you a data point.
Oh, okay. You nailed it. All right.
Firefighter said that you said, I hit him.
I said, I hit him. It was preceded by a did and proceeded by a question mark. What I thought could have happened was that did I incapacitate him unwittingly, somehow, and then in his drunkenness, passed out?
When you walked out of the bar, how many drinks had you had?
I had probably about 4.
The Commonwealth says that you had 9 drinks that night. That's what the prosecution says.
I don't believe they're saying I wasn't in my right mind.
They were saying you were intoxicated. Is it possible that you might have hit him unwittingly in your admittedly very large SUV?
No, not possible.
Let's talk about what we think has happened so far, what we've seen, and maybe if you guys feel like it, tell what you think actually happened and what you think is going to happen. Don't feel like you have to, because these are just our opinions. That doesn't mean whatever we're going to say happened. These are just our opinions. So, Mark, what have you seen so far? What do you think?
Well, look, here's what I'll say so far is I don't think I've seen enough. I don't think there's enough there for me to really nail a color to a post and, stand and salute it. So, I'm really going to.
I don't think this panel educated themselves enough to do this video, but what do I know?
Be in the indecisive box here, unfortunately, and that's not often the case, but I have to say I'm indecisive. Now, there's some stuff that does not make sense and doesn't look good about this, but I'm not seeing enough of the potential other side to really make a decision on this one. That's very disappointing, and I hate to be in that position, but that's just the reality of it. Chase, what are you thinking?
I'm with you. And I try not to look at the case. I did today. It is some of the most bizarre, crazy stuff.
And that might be why Chase has probably the most objective points of view throughout this observation from the panel, or analysis from the panel, that he actually educated himself a little bit. Like, I'm so proud of him.
On the other side of this thing that I have no words for, but her behavior shows a mix of genuine emotions and then signs of stress. She seems mostly sincere, but there are red flags, especially around her drinking, which might affect her memory, being intoxicated. So remember, and I just want to put this point out there.
I think the red flag around her drinking is that she's saying she had 4. She knows the prosecution's going to say she had more, and she also knows the prosecution's going to say that she was intoxicated, and she also knows that the prosecution has video footage of her getting drinks from the bar. So I think all of that, it's like she's saying, I know I had 4, but there's a whole weight of things being said against me about how many drinks I had, and there's even evidence suggesting that I had more. Again, I do not trust the prosecution's narrative, and any one of those drinks, or even half of those drinks that she was receiving at the bar, and we can see on camera, it could have been water. It could have been water.
Or getting to this point, not seeing obvious signs of lying does not mean innocence. So we focus on what behaviors are present or missing. Sometimes the questions don't create enough stress to trigger fight or flight or any kind of the behaviors we might look for. And in this video, we couldn't even really hear the exact questions. And the editing is all over the place, which complicates stuff a whole lot for people like us. And as a final verdict, something is way off. Something's way off. She might be unsure about what happened because she was too drunk. I'm going to err on the side of there's so much going on the other side, and her behavior looks so fluid here in all the points that I would expect it to not. I would say she's most likely innocent.
Awesome. Thank you, Chase. And I'll leave the link in the description below. I'm not going to play anymore because I didn't really like Greg's take, and Scott is, I don't know. So anyway, I'll leave the link in the description below. Again, mostly I enjoy the behavior panel. They are a wealth of information, educational, informative. But yes, I disagree with them a lot, and I also disagree with how they generalize and blanket things on every single personality. And I just think that there are just always going to be variables when it comes to human beings. Yes, psychology has come a long way. We understand behavioral issues and the DSM, for instance, like, we understand all those things at this point. Psychology does, and it keeps evolving. New information comes through all the time. New studies all the time. What we know now about human behavior could be vastly different from what we know about human behavior 100 years from now. So I'm just saying, I don't think this is the end all be all, the behavior panel. I think they could be as incorrect as they are correct, if for all we know. But it is still educational, because some of the things that make people overt liars are more obvious than overt liars realize. And that's always fun, to just look at someone and just know, yeah, you're full of shit, you're lying. Like, you have all the red flags. You checked off all the boxes. Don't believe a damn thing that's coming out of your mouth. And that's always great, because then if you know what signs to look for, because then you're less likely to be deceived or duped, things like that. But overall, I think it's enough to just be a critical thinker. You can simply be a critical thinker and learn how to analyze things. That's what this YouTube channel is about. That's what my YouTube channel is about. That's why it's called Analyze. I want to spread and encourage critical thinking independent thinking. I want people thinking about the information they are consuming, especially when it comes from mainstream media, government, and things like that. Institutions that have long been known to lie and conflate things and just to be tyrannical, truly. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.